Hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the session, Aligning Leadership with the Science of Reading, a Systems Level Design for Change. Oh, I just need to quickly disable this, and then these people can come in. My name is Kirsten DeRoche. I am a consultant at the Patent East office, and I'm excited today to facilitate this session. A few housekeeping items before we begin. Handouts for the session will be housed on Schoology. They will be ready after the session, so just so that you are aware. And the session is being recorded and is 75 minutes long. The chat feature will be off between participants, but you will be able to chat with me if you have any needs. I will relay those to the presenters. Please keep your video features off and mute yourself to eliminate any potential distractions to the presentation. Questions. What we will be doing for questions is you can submit those in the chat, and I will take care of disseminating those to the presenters, and they will be able to get some answers for those questions either at the end of the presentation or later. We kind of have a plan for that. And one last piece is that we would like for you to please share on social media all that you're learning in regards to the Lit Symposium, and the hashtag for it is hashtag PA Lit Symposium 2020. So, welcome, and I'd just like to introduce our presenters. They are Dr. Angela McMasters and Mr. Michael Bukovich, sorry. Okay, Dr. McMasters is a nationally certified school psychologist at Indiana Area School District, an adjunct faculty member at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. Dr. McMasters has presented at state and national conferences on a variety of topics related to reading, behavior, assessment, and intervention. Currently, Dr. McMasters facilitates the development and design of multi-tiered systems of supports, MTSS, for the district, which includes data-based decision-making, implementation of evidence-based practices, and professional development planning and delivery. Mr. Bukovich is the superintendent of schools at Indiana Area School District, an adjunct professor at University of Pittsburgh, Johnstown. He's been recognized with the NAACP Freedom Citation Award for leading, developing, and providing access for students to post-secondary options. Mr. Bukovich is the recipient of the William E. Caldwell Award for Excellence in Administration and Supervision by the PA School Study Council and the 2018 PASS Award for Instructional Leadership. Superintendent National Blue Ribbon School of Excellence Award recipient. He is a member of the College Board of PA Superintendent Advisory Council. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you so much for the introductions. We're looking forward to our time together today, and if I know some of you were in the session that I just did, sharing a case study, and so we're hoping that this answers some of those follow-up questions that the participants had as well. So quickly, we'll first jump into, there we go, about us and our mission. So there's me with my family on the left. That is not a real shark. And I just wanted to let you know that as I had shared previously, like I said, for those in the other session, is that my passion for doing what's best for kids has always been at the heart of everything that I do. And as a school psychologist and then a letters trainer, I just realized there was so much more work to be done, not just in literacy, but that has been a large focus. And I've worked in many, many districts that leadership is so important and so critical for systemic change. And oftentimes I'd have conversation with leadership and it would be, you know, let's learn more information, let's brainstorm some ideas. But when the rubber met the road, things fell apart. And then I met Mr. Bukovich and realized that he is a visionary leader that can really help us implement change. And so we're excited to share our journey and talk about how it looks through the lens of leadership, as well as the actions that we had to take for change.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Bukovich. Thank you for the kind introductions. As you can see, I'm completely blessed. I have a beautiful family. So my son and my daughter, my oldest two, are 10 and 8. We adopted them, and then 11 years later, my wife and I, we were blessed to be pregnant, and a year later, we had our youngest, which is Vivian. So when I try to make our decisions and guide us through these turbulent times or through any decision making, I try to say, you know, I always remind myself what's best for us, what's best for kids. And I put, you know, if these were my kids and I was making decisions for my own kids, it's just what I'd want to do. So they're everything to me, and they help me get through everything. So thank you for allowing me to take a moment to share how blessed I am with you. So today, our goals and objectives, we're going to try to be pretty direct, and we're going to focus on two things, really. One, the idea of what it looks like from a leadership view of how we tackled the change moving towards the science of literacy, and then what actions were needed to build that system in order to reach those goals. And it's funny, when we started this project, you know, I kept telling my team, telling my principals, and telling Ange and everyone on the team, saying, look, there's really two things people hate: change and the way things are. And I say that flippantly, but it's also true, right? So as we go down this road, we had to make a decision what we thought was best for everyone and for the kids, based on science, based on the data, and make that commitment and stay the course. So that's our goal today, really show you our story, tell you our story, and some of the steps we took systematically along the way. Go ahead, next one.
Yeah.
So when we did that, we challenged our team, say, look, do we really have the courage to follow and show others how to follow? I'm not going to mitigate the need for leadership, but we also can't exclude the need for people to follow, for people to believe in that. And that really goes to our culture that we're trying to create here as a district, as an administrative team, and for our teachers, something that they want to follow and be a part of. So please, again, I'm not trying to mitigate the need for leadership, but also don't want to ignore the need for people to be followers. So we have a quick little video I know Ange wanted to show to everyone today that talks about the need to try to put a smile on everyone's face. And I'm sure you probably saw it's been highly used throughout the internet, but put a smile on everyone's face about the need of how you really start a movement, how you really start change, because change is complex in nature.
And then you can guess which one of us was the lone nut.
So ladies and gentlemen, at TED we talk a lot about leadership and how to make a movement. So let's watch a movement happen, start to finish, in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons from it. First, of course you know, a leader needs the guts to stand out and be ridiculed. But what he's doing is so easy to follow. So here's this first follower with a crucial role. He's going to show everyone else how to follow. Now notice that the leader embraces him as an equal. So now it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Now there he is calling to his friends. Now if you notice that the first follower is actually an underestimated form of leadership in itself. It takes guts to stand out like that. The first follower is what transforms a lone nut into a leader. And here comes a second follower. Now it's not a lone nut, it's not two nuts, 3 is a crowd, and a crowd is news. So a movement must be public. It's important to show not just the leader, but the followers, because you find that new followers emulate the followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, and immediately after, 3 more people. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point. Now we've got a movement. So notice that as more people join in, it's less risky. So those that were sitting on the fence before now have no reason not to. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, but they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. So over the next minute, you'll see all of the those that prefer to stick with the crowd, because eventually they would be ridiculed for not joining in. And that's how you make a movement. But let's recap some lessons from this. So first, if you are the type, like the shirtless dancing guy, that is standing alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals. So it's clearly about the movement, not you. Okay, but we might have missed the real lesson here. The biggest lesson, if you noticed, did you catch it? Is that leadership is over-glorified. That yes, it was the shirtless guy was first, and he'll get all the credit, but it was really the first follower that transformed the lone nut into a leader. So as we're told that we should all be leaders, that would be really ineffective. If you really care about starting a movement, have the courage to follow and show others how to follow. And when you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first. Ed, thanks.
So what we want to do here is, based on that video, based on our values of leadership, we asked ourselves, look, what's the biggest objective or goal a leader should have to do in a school district, in a corporation, on a football team, whatever. And we came to consensus there's two big things. Our goal is to provide hope and opportunity for our staff, students, and community through excellent leadership at every level of the organization. And I really truly believe that. Are we providing hope? Are we encouraging people to move forward and be better tomorrow than they were yesterday? Are we giving them opportunity to grow and develop? And do we treat each other with kindness and equal? So what we did was we said, okay, so how do we map this out? How do we build a framework that everyone can follow and understand? Because when you talk about anything, whether it's implementing social emotional learning, going towards the science of reading, implementing a math program, a change in schedule, how do you really chunk it out in a way that is meaningful, manageable, and understandable for everyone? So what we did is we said, look, I think these are the 5 steps that we're going to look at as we attack the science of reading, how we went from a switch from the whole language approach to the science of reading approach. So what we did, we said, step 1, we're going to engage our leaders, right? We're going to engage our leaders. We're going to engage our followers, our community, our board. And second, we're going to build a vision, right? We're going to build a vision for the district that is aligned to meet the needs of our students and beyond. And that has to include tough conversations. And when you have these tough conversations, you'll see that emotions get in the way sometimes, or they're a part of the conversation. And our thought was, look, love is more than just a feeling. It's a commitment. And if we're really going to envision a future where all means all, then we include everyone. We do the best we can to challenge each and every one of us to grow, to develop, and make sure we reach that ultimate goal where we want to be. And what we laugh about sometimes with each other, step 1 to a happier life is to give up hope for a better past. We can't control what happened in the past. And what we really had to do is envision a new future, that we support our teachers, that we give them the right equipment and tools that needed to execute this program well. So next up, we went on to equip, right? We want to make sure that we give our teachers and build them with the right capacity, build our administrators as well, and develop them and who they are. And when you look at mindset, break it down to 2 words. You have to use your mind, but you also have to reset it at times. And we want to include and improve their skill set. And at the end of the day, we want to execute. We have to deliver. Our kids are counting on us. Our community's counting on us. So we have to deliver with fidelity. And that has to be an unwavering commitment to us and to, most importantly, our kids. And then lastly, we need to be kind to each other and pick each other up. I think there's beauty in the journey. I think you can learn a lot from failure, but we had to be encouraging enough to stay the course. And that means encouraging not only our staff and our students, but each other. And as we went through this, it was a tough task at times, and it still is. Not because we have bad people, but because, again, there's 2 things people hate: change and the way things are. So we had to encourage each other, give this strength to go through and be consistent and meet the moment. And that's exactly what we're doing. So what we would like to do then is kind of really break this down into 2 parts. And when we go through the 5 components, engage, envision, equip, etc., we broke it down to what does leadership's role look like, and then what actions did we take. And I got to tell you, one of the biggest things we did was we focused on relationships and we focused on our culture. And I want to spend a couple of minutes going over that, because I got to tell you, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, but if we want to close the achievement gap, we really must take a look at what we're doing to close the access and opportunity gap. And that's what we wanted to focus on as a culture. Did we truly believe all means all? Are we going to stand by that philosophy, that view set? So when you look at our culture, here's when people say, Mike, how do you define your culture? My hope one day that everyone will be able to sing this song. And we're not there yet, but this is how I would define our culture. I told you we have 2 big goals. We provide hope and opportunity. Third thing I want to do, I want to treat everyone with kindness. I think if you ask me what the world needs now more than ever, for people to be kind to one another, good to one another. And that doesn't mean everyone gets their way. And care is not a weak term. I think care is saying you have the courage and kindness to stay, go forward and stay resolute in your beliefs and your actions, but also help pick people up. And that's exactly what we did. Next part, when we define our culture, we're going to do our job. And I don't mean that in a nasty way, like go back to your room and just teach. It's not what's meant. What is meant by that is if everyone does their part, right? If everyone can take control of their square footage, their world, their realm, and it's aligned to our common vision, and we all execute with high fidelity, I think that we could be unlimited in our potential. And then lastly, what's going to guide us in everything we do, are we doing what's in the best interest of the kids? And it goes more beyond just the saying or more beyond just rhetoric. It's truly at the heart of what we're doing. And that's the conversation we had when we talked about the whole language to move to the science of reading approach. How could we ignore that data? How can we ignore the evidence? And I asked the whole group, who's the first one to pick to ignore it? Where do we want to go from here? Are we going to address this issue, or are we going to admire the problem? And that was the challenge we issued among our team and among our group. So that's exactly what we did, because you got to understand, you don't get a good culture, by just preaching about culture, right? You get it through practicing it, by the behaviors you permit, and promoting it. And what we're trying to do is truly believe that attitude reflects leadership, and that we ourselves then were immersed in various professional development trainings to make sure we are equipped to help do this job and support our teachers, because we couldn't send them into battle without the appropriate tools.
And so looking at each of these from the leadership lens, but then also what were the actions that went along with each of these areas. So it was a lot of conversation and dialogue with the school board, with parents. There were, parents across the district who were experiencing similar frustrations with, skill acquisition and reading, or ways that they could help their children at home. There were reading specialist teachers who were saying, hey, something's off. What do we need to fix? There's things that we have to adjust and change. But we really had to look at those conversations around the philosophical to the scientific shift in best practices. So when you're trained in a certain way, and we're a new leadership team as far as, Mike's in his second year here, this is my first year here, our director of education's first year. So there was a lot of change in leadership. So there were many conversations that were happening, and previous practice was, you're trained on whole language or balanced literacy, you're using benchmark literacy, we're doing guided reading groups, F&P assessment is huge and essential, that's what we're doing. So then here we come, and we look like we're just plowing through all this hard work and energy and effort that was spent investing in the teachers' professional development and practice, and what was emphasized as being so important for them. So then here we come having these difficult conversations, but they were necessary conversations, difficult for sure, but if you go back to the culture that has been established by the leadership team, we had to go there because it's what's best for kids.
When we look at the vision component, again, our philosophy really means, if we're going to say all means all, then we truly have to live up to that. And what we found was our system was missing certain parts for the kids who were struggling and falling behind. And I challenged our group, look, if all means all, what are we going to do to really address this? Look at our needs and look at the deficiencies, and what can we do to build a system that prepares for the future and beyond. And what we did was we developed a vision of what we think our future looks like. And that includes a lot of things. One, the creation and implementation of MTSS model, K-8 within 5 years, right? And we're only in our second year. Year 1 is for tier 1. Now with the closure and everything else, year 2 is going to be for tier 1. And we're okay with that. We're willing to surrender that because there's beauty in the journey. We just have to stay the course. We also want to make sure we have a system of professional learning in place for our staff and for our administrators in the area of literacy, aligned to what the science of reading says and what the data tells us, right? Evidence-based program has to be at the heart of what we're doing. We want to make sure also that we support our people well, that we have ongoing support for our students and our staff. And what we did there was we hired this year 3 full-time MTSS facilitators, and also serve as enrolled school psychologists. So our teachers are supported, because as we go through this change, they need support, they need love, they need kindness, they need feedback that's meaningful, not just judgmental. So we want to make sure that when we ask people to do something, we give them the right tools to execute to the best of their ability. We also want to make sure we have systems in place in regards to data analysis, protocols, data teams. And then finally, our vision included win time, right? What I need for everyone, and what does that look like? To me, that's the true meaning of personalized learning, right? I think our teachers are better than a computer. I think our teachers are better than a program. And I think our students need that one-on-one moment and that really personalized learning approach. And that's what we're developing and trying to do here. Got a long way to go, but the fact is we're not just saying, hey, we can't do it. We're finding solutions, and we're eliminating barriers, because after all, that's what we think our kids deserve and need.
And so when we look at the action items related to the vision, so all means all, and looking at it from the equitable lens, do our instructional practices align with what is equitable for all of our kids so that everybody can look over the fence? Some might need some things different than others, but if we mean that, then from there, we need to know what we have to enact to create change. So that's where the needs assessment came into place. And we'll talk more in depth about what came out of the needs assessment and how we even further focused our direction, but it truly came down to a systemic overhaul. And even back in graduate school, as we did a lot of reading on organizational structures, systemic change, they focus and talk a lot about barriers, how change is hard, why barriers come up, how do you remove barriers? So you kind of get prepared to think like, whoa, that's going to be really intense and difficult. And it is. But you have to have the grit to move forward and do what's best for kids. And I know we keep coming back to that same message, but we really have a chance to make a difference for our students.
One of the big things we noticed is we need to build capacity, right? Not only for our teachers, but most importantly for our leadership, right? We want to develop a skill set. So we did a couple things, and we didn't do alone. I got to tell you, as you go down this journey, if you decide to go down this journey, many of you probably already ahead of this journey, you can't do it alone. You need a team. You need to be surrounded by good people, and you need to bring outside experts in to help not only open your eyes, but build your capacity. So with our administrators, we required all of them, including me, to go through a pill literacy course that was conducted by Patan to build our knowledge, to build our understanding, to really address that. So when it comes to building schedules or looking at staffing, looking at materials and resources, we have a better understanding of what we're ordering rather than just rubber stamping that. That was important to us. We also then have professional readings and discussions on the science of reading, right? What does it look like? What does it sound like? Why is this important? Why is this mindset different than what others may see? And what's the beauty in that? What's the benefit behind that? And it took a lot of time to have those conversations, and we're still having them. But at the end of the day, you get your say. Our approach to leadership with some of our people is you get your say, you don't get your way. So we had to stay the course. We made a commitment as a team, and we want to develop our own skill set and our own capacity because it matters, right? It really, truly matters. And our mindset matters. And again, in this case, when you look at mindset, take the word in half, mind and set, we had a reset, right? We had to rethink, reimagine, rebuild the way we view this scenario and what we could do for kids, because the data was pretty explicit in what was necessary. The data was pretty clear on what our deficiencies were. And we had a choice. Do we admire the problem or do we work towards solving it? And that wasn't a teacher issue. It was a system issue, which I'm ultimately responsible for. So we wanted to make sure that before we went down this road, that our leadership team had the right skill set. And I think Angela talked to you a little bit about what we did for the teachers, because that was equally as important.
Yeah, so on the action side, you think about Scarborough's rope and background knowledge, and I feel as though that was huge in this process, was not only equipping with resources, but also with the knowledge to be confident in the changes that were happening. Because absent of knowledge, then the emotions were running high. So we were working to build the background knowledge. So we did Letters Module 1 training for all staff. We also did the Haggerty Phonological Awareness training for staff. We had a group of people attending the foundational reading series Patton was offering. And then from there, we had to have that ongoing coaching and support. So as Mike had talked about the data teaming and looking at how we structured our data teams, how we looked at data, looked at the meaning of data, we really had to continue to have those conversations through frequent coaching and support with grade level teams, with individual teachers, just to support their understanding of the direction we're headed. Because it's like me telling him to drive across the country and end up in California. Well, how do you want me to get there? Okay, well, I'm not going to give you a map, just start driving. You can't do that and be effective. So it's really important to try to be thoughtful of that. And sometimes that's hard because there's different things that come up that you don't anticipate coming. And so being able to respond to those in an efficient way is something else that's really important. So background knowledge was huge, and building accessing the technical assistance. So patent consultants, your local IUs, all of those individuals are tremendously helpful when you're looking at implementing change.
So we talked about the engage part, right? Reaching out to our stakeholders, reaching out to our families, looking at the data, envisioning a better tomorrow, building capacity. Then this year it came time to execute, right? We had to run the play. We couldn't call it audible. We had to make an unwavering commitment. And that's when a lot of people went through a lot of emotions, right? And I make fun of this. This is my family trip to Disney in July. And by the way, I would never recommend to go to Disney in July for what it's worth. It was brutally hot, but these are some of the emotions that our staff went through, that we went through. So on the left, you see my son, like wide-eyed, like, wow, oh my goodness, you mean we're changing everything? This is insane. Then there's my wife on one of the bad days where she's like, really? This is really what we're doing? And then there's my daughters, two of my daughters just saying, oh my goodness, I am scared out of my mind. This is crazy. And I did this, and I showed this to the staff at the beginning of the year, not to make fun of my family, because I'm very blessed to have them, but just to remind people, emotions is part of life. Well, our job right now is to stabilize the ship, move people forward, love people up, and get people through this moment, because this is a natural reaction. People get overwhelmed, they get scared, they get angry, but we have to deliver. At the end of the day, it's not a me versus you or anything of that sort. It's about what can we do as an organization to provide the best for our kids, because they deserve that. So expanding upon what we did at leadership, again, we wanted to execute, but we didn't want to just go through the motions. What we asked and begged our people is, please choose leadership, choose impact over compliance, execute, but execute with fidelity, and know that you're not doing it alone. We're doing it as a team. We'll win and lose as a team. And when you go back to that culture circle, the one part was do your job, right? My job, build the system, put the right people in the right places. Principal's job, go out there and execute, love your people up, give them good feedback that encourages growth and not judgmental, and run the play. And that's our silly mantra that we use, run the play. And that's what we wanted to make sure we do, because when I got here, it's a great district already, but when I got here, I found we were all working in silos. And what a kid learns, or what knowledge a kid gains, should depend on the teacher they have. If all means all, then we have to equip all of our teachers with great tools to make sure all of our kids are learning and being treated in the same manner.
So with the action items that go along with this, and just as like Mike had said earlier, we're in year one, so we also realize that we have some growing to do, but our action items for execution really come down to ongoing system checks. So it's not something you can just plop into your system and just expect it to run efficiently. So a large part of that is the fidelity of implementation. How well are we doing with pacing? How well are we doing with following and implementing the programs as they're intended? Because we know if they're not implemented as intended, you won't produce the same outcomes that have been demonstrated in the evidence. So then you lose the evidence base for what you're doing. Data review and teaming was also really important, because you can't just collect data and then have it sit on a shelf. It really gives you thoughtful information about your students and ways to look at groups of students and not just individual kids. And then lastly would be those instructional changes. So, shifting over and adding in Hegarty and adding in foundations, and also looking at instructional changes with, for example, increasing instructional intensity, increasing opportunities for students to respond. So within tier one, tightening it up as much as possible. And again, we still have growing to do in all of these areas, but it's pretty incredible when you even look back to where we were at 8 months ago and how far we've come. So, but ongoing system checks are essential to execution.
What we did then is we told our staff, if you remember the pictures of my family and some of those moments from the trip, if you're willing to choose impact over compliance, and you're really truly committed to the process, right? Understanding we're going to fall, but we're going to pick ourselves back up. Understand we're going to make mistakes, but we're going to learn from them, and encourage, support each other. Then we could be that happy family. Now, right, don't get me wrong. Prior to that picture being taken, it's crazy, right? I know that, but then you get that one moment, and that moment means the world to us. We met the moment. We want to do everything we can to provide our kids, and we want to, never once did we want to apologize for having high expectations, right? The standard is the standard. We're going to go out, we're going to go after it, we're going to meet to the best of our ability. Where I think people can get in trouble is you can't have high expectations and then not support your people along the way. So what we did was, from a systematic standpoint, yes, it's great to have high expectations, and I don't apologize for any of them. But did we support our people along the way to make sure they can reach them? If not, that's just not, it doesn't make sense. It's it's irrational. It's not feasible. And we wanted to make sure, yeah, you know what, we're going to love you, we're going to support you, but we're going to get after it, and we're going to make the switch, and we're going to do it in a way that's impactful, meaningful, and kind to the best of our ability, because that's who we are. And the pep talks are nice, and we'll give them, right? I'm all about that, and there's a part of it. But what happens after pep talks end, right? Does it sustain? Does it matter? Are people going to be committed to the change? So we wanted to connect with them on a personal level, because I think relationships matter, and we need to have positive relationships, and people need to know that we care about them and that we're going to love them. But you know what? The standard is the standard. Lasting change is only really going to matter, or going to have to be impacted when the need for change is understood and internalized by everyone. And what we told our staff was, have faith in our future, right? Again, you can't have a better future or a happier future by hoping for a better past, right? We're moving forward. That decision has been made. How can we help you now meet that goal, meet that moment? And this decision wasn't made in isolation. Reading specialists are part of it. Outside experts were a part of it. So it was one that was made decisively, right? We went slow to go fast, but we had to make a decision, right? And once we made that decision, our goal was to support everyone to the best of our ability. And we have a lot more to go, right? We do, but we're working towards getting there. And again, what we encourage our people is choose impact over compliance. Don't do this just because we said. Do it because it can have an impact and help a child be successful. You want to lower the amount of people who are facing, incarceration or difficult times down the road. Let's educate them, right? Let's teach them how to read. Let's teach them how to understand their emotions, how to connect with others. And let's embed that with a sense of understanding of social emotional learning and kindness at the forefront. And that's what we're trying to do. When you look at behavior, right, we personalize instruction, but do we personalize behavior? And some of those mitigating factors why you get those behaviors, maybe because they can't read or they're frustrated and they don't understand it. So we wanted to really build a better future. We wanted to build something that was impactful, and we're a work in progress. But I got to tell you, there's beauty in the journey, and we're willing to tackle that problem.
Yeah, so encouragement is huge. And, so even as a school psychologist, as I started this journey with letters and building my literacy knowledge, and I remember sitting there thinking, a lot of this is new knowledge that I needed to be able to be a better school psychologist. And I had to get to know it. I had to internalize it. I had to think critically about it. And then I had to think about how to apply it to my practice. And so as we had a lot of those hard conversations with teachers, and as I said, emotions run high, but they run high when there's change. And Jack Fletcher kind of did that to me yesterday a little bit, realizing that we have to revisit our practices as school psychologists in the way that we're identifying kids with learning disorders. So as I look at teachers who are saying, we feel like you were brought here to fix us. No, our teachers weren't the ones that needed fixed. As Mike said, it was the system that needed fixed. But the teachers are a large part of that system. And so we had to absolutely provide the encouragement, the support. And it was really cool. And I really wish that we would have had an opportunity to end the year looking at our end of year data, because the middle of the year assessments were you could kind of almost start to see in teachers' faces, like, this is working and our kids are picking up on it. And even as we went to remote learning, the energy and the effort that teachers put into carrying the vision through to fruition by doing, foundations lessons remotely and checking in with kids, and really you could tell that they started to internalize it and make that shift. And that's where those frequent check-ins, the encouragement, and really being a team player. Like when you're a team, you have a player that's down, you're not running away from them, you're rallying around them and bringing them along. And so I really saw how the teams and the infrastructure grew, but it wasn't until you weathered some storms first. So again, those action items are there, but those were critical to getting people to choose impact over compliance. So we all know we love Scarborough's rope, so I couldn't resist an opportunity to apply system level design to strands of a rope. So whenever we think and we talk about this, and as I started to work on building out specifically the MTSS structure and what it looks like taking all of that and putting it on paper in some sort of cohesive way so that, if somebody has to pick it up and take off where somebody else leaves off, they know what the plan is, what is the play. And so as I thought of all of these, they're so interconnected, all of your systems. So just as like Mike had said, if there's behavior problems, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Was it a difficulty with learning first and then you start to see behaviors, or was it behaviors that then led to a lack of instruction and therefore difficulties in reading? So you really can't just look at one leg of a system because they are so interconnected. So what I did is I tried to take all of those things that have comprised the changes that we started to make in literacy and looked at that through the lens of what is equitable. And I think that equity lens is so important. And I shared this in the last training that I just did. I remember this boy sat across from me, and most kids that I'm testing are kids who are struggling to read. And this boy in particular, he had ripped jeans, his shoes were falling apart. And he's like, I just want to read. I want to do well. I want to please my teachers. And I don't know what else he had, but if we weren't able to give him that ability to read, it's going to impact him for the rest of his life, no matter what he does, whether he chooses a skill and goes out to become a welder or to become a professional someday. He's still going to have to be able to read. And so how could we change that trajectory for him? And so really your systems level design is going to change the trajectory for so many of your kids. And that was another thing. I remember sitting in, I can't even remember which leadership meeting we were having. And this woman said, you know, it was her niece, I think. And she said, the ability to read will change her life. It'll change her trajectory. And I 110% believe that. So when you're looking at systems level design, you have to look at all of these pieces and you have to look at them. And I know, I can't remember who told me, but Scarborough didn't intend for the bottom part of her rope to be braided and tight and for her top part to be able to roll together. But I look at these as you can always add into your twist. So you're always growing and changing and reevaluating your system and your system design to create those outcomes. So now we'll kind of move into specifically more of how we applied these different areas with the data that we were looking at. So this was what led us to a call to change. So if you look at, this was the benchmark assessments, the universal screening data for last school year. And there were previous school years that had aligned with this very well. For those of you that are familiar with these reports, you can see that at the start of the year, and this was all of our students K-2, at the start of the year, we start with 69% at or above benchmark. And we know that the cut point is the lowest level of okay. That is the 40th percentile. So even those students, that 22% that were in the green at the start of the year, that did not guarantee that they weren't going to fall below benchmark. So then you fast forward to the spring at the end of the year, and what had started to happen is we were growing those students that were falling within the well below benchmark range, and we were also losing students from those that were performing above benchmark. And so, as I had also mentioned previously, as school psychologists, you have to look at, is your tier 1 effective? Have students received evidence-based instruction that would suggest that there is a possibility of a learning disorder? Because, and so then that begs the question, well, how do you know? And I remember Joe Kovaleski, he said, well, are 80% of your kids at or above benchmark? Because if 80% of your kids are at or above benchmark, you can assume that kids are receiving evidence-based instruction that is meeting their needs. And then you'll have that 15% that need a little bit more, and then you'll have the 5% that really needs intense instruction. So if you look at this, we weren't producing those outcomes. And in fact, by the end of the year, we had lost more students than we had gained in those areas. So this was one of the elements, in addition to all those others where we had talked to, you know, teachers and parents and the school board and things like that, that led us to change. All right, so we talked a little bit about communication and the transparent dialogue and how important that is. And I have shared about how we've had to have many, many hard conversations. And because change is hard, and this was not something I'm sure I was always ready for handling the emotions of others well, but I had to realize that you can either run from the emotion or you can embrace that emotion and help to continue to support what's best for kids. So I always, again, operating from what is best for kids. And if I know it's what's best for kids, it makes it easier for me to have those hard conversations. And again, you come into a district, a whole new leadership team, and you're saying, whoa, wait, what you were doing isn't producing the best outcomes for kids. You're taking away all that energy and effort and hard work people had put in. And we know that. And we know that we have amazing educators and amazing teachers. But we had to get them to see that we're not swinging the pendulum so far to the other side that it's only phonics and phonology, but we're landing it in the middle. So we're hitting all of the essential elements of reading and literacy, and that it's going to look different. And yes, you want your kids to be able to read, but they might look like readers coming out of kindergarten, first, second grade. But then we're looking at when we're ready to move into the 4-5 buildings with our MTSS initiative. And from those teachers, we're hearing, when are you coming? What are the changes going to be? Our kids are struggling, and you can see it in their writing, in their spelling, in their ability to read multisyllabic words. So even as they're leaving those lower grade levels and appear to be readers, as they make the shift from learning to read to reading to learn, the wheels are falling off the cart. So again, back to the hard conversations and just engaging the stakeholders and in that transparent dialogue was really important.
So when you start looking at the areas, I learned this from a wonderful consultant who, Cindy Goldsworthy, who taught me a long time ago, look, if you're going to focus and attack a problem, as far as, something of this nature, organize it by child, right? Curriculum, instruction, assessment, and organization. So what we did was then we took our guiding framework for leadership and cross-referenced with how can we attack this problem. So we looked at those 4 paradigms, right? Organization, instruction, curriculum, and assessment. And we wanted to see how we can go about building this, our vision, and executing it and putting the proper places in the right spots. And that's exactly what we did. And the next several slides will go over some of the tenets of what those pieces look like.
So as I keep mentioning equity, it's kind of like equity layered on top of all of these areas. So from the needs assessment, what's the direction that we're going to go? So we realized that our system wasn't organized in a way that met the needs of all students. Our instructional practices did not align with the science of reading. In addition to that, differentiated instruction is important. It's important for kids to have opportunities to work in small groups, but it's also important to make sure that your student engaged time is high, because admittedly, it's very easy for me, if I was working with a friend that I really enjoyed spending time with, I could be like appearing to be the very best reader ever, but then as soon as my teacher turned their head, I'd be chit-chatting and socializing. So even though that group of students that will be working with the teacher would have high engagement, I think it's really important that we're ensuring that there is high academic engagement across the board, that there is increasing instructional intensity, and all of those other instructional practices that just tighten up your tier 1 regardless of the content area. We also realized that we needed curriculum materials and resources that were rooted in balanced literacy. So as you go through benchmark literacy, which is our program, it focused on metacognitive strategies for comprehension. It focused on, helping kids walk through and learn vocabulary and demonstrate their understanding of comprehension, but it really didn't have a component. It was very absent of any of the basic reading skills, phonics and phonology. So we knew we had to tighten up tier 1 by addressing that immediately. And then lastly, using the assessment data from standardized universal screenings effectively. So when we first started, I also found, in addition to providing the background knowledge and information about the science of reading, we really had to also educate and teach about assessment. And I think for me, because assessment is a large part of what school psychologists do, it just made sense. But I didn't realize how much it was important for me to share some of those technical adequacies with teachers, that using something like Dibble's Next, it's standardized, it's reliable, it's valid, and it is supported by decades of research as far as how it relates to outcomes of reading. And it's a quick assessment. It's like a temperature check. It's not the be all and end all, but it can give us a really quick measure of, are you well and you're on track to doing well, or are you maybe showing some signs that we need to dig deeper and check your blood sugars? So that's how I had to work to present that, so that we knew actually how to use that data. And again, it was really cool as we did the data walls at the start of the year to the middle of the year, where people were more engaged and they were up at the data walls and they were looking at it and trying to figure out, how kids moved or what improvements they made, and some of them were like, oh my gosh, look how awesome this is. I can't believe how far they moved. And others were like, oh, I wonder what's happening with this student. So I'm going to flip that card so I can come back to it and make sure that we're addressing those skill needs. So it was really important for us to educate on the assessment end as well. So as we are equipping and moving toward an integrated tiered system of supports, it was really important for us to look at an integrated model. And so we knew that we had to integrate skills, that you can't just focus on one area. You can't just focus on literacy, that they're all intertwined and interconnected. So you look at applying a very similar structure to each of these areas to make it cohesive so that your practices are integrated for all kids. It was also important to integrate data so that you can look at the relationship between academic, behavioral, and social emotional skill development. So even having conversations about literacy, aligned right along with that in a spreadsheet would be, okay, so what are the behavior, are there any behavioral concerns for this student? Have they been identified on the universal screening for behavior as a student with internalizing or externalizing behaviors? How are their social and emotional skill developments? Are they progressing? Do they struggle with peer relationships or those kinds of things? So having an integrated perspective of groups of kids. And then lastly was tier integration. So making sure that our evidence-based practices were aligned within as well as across the tiered instruction and intervention. And again, we're still growing and we're still working and we still have improvements to make because this was large to tackle prior to being thrown into the middle of a pandemic. But it's also shown us where we need to grow and get better because you're always going to be evaluating your system, regardless of whether you're in year 1 or year 10. So this was another way that I work well from graphics and images because it helps me look at the infrastructure to figure out how to build out from there. So as I've emphasized how important that leadership and management piece is, it's almost like that foundational piece that allows you to shoot off with high instructional supports for students that facilitate their learning, but also allows you to set and establish supports for learning. So while you have your standards and you have your teacher quality and your curriculum, that's the instructional side, but then you also have to support kids' learning, which would be through your school-wide PBIS programs and your SEL curriculum that you're utilizing for all students, so that you can provide equitable supports for kids across all of those levels. So leadership is truly the foundation for the facilitation and support of learning.
What we did as we went through this, then we also had to have honest conversations. We had a wonderful young lady who worked with us for beginning of the year, and she would always say, you tell me who, on the wall, who do you want, who don't you, who are you okay with not reaching, being able to read, and then we'll be okay. And it was done in a way that really made it profound to say, look, you tell me is okay, right? We didn't want to run away from the expectations. We didn't want to run away from the standards. So we had to really force our principals to really grow and lead in this area. And we still got a lot of work to do. But again, there's beauty in the journey. But we really had decided if we're going to lead, then let's get out and lead. Are you willing to stay the course, willing to deal with the emotions and the pitfalls that come along with this? But really, at the end of the day, understand that the best interests of kids are at stake here. Their lives are at stake here. And it's not just something that's said in an interview or something that's said to sound silly. Do you really mean it? And if not, we were clear. There's other places for you. But if you're going to be here, all means all, and we're going to really commit to this, and we need everyone to function at a high level to do your part, do your job, because we can't do it alone. We can't do it in isolation. If there's one weak link, it impacts everyone. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to give up on you. It means we're going to love you, support you, and help us all grow. But we had to really commit to that, and that was a harsh conversation we need to have. So before we got to the teachers, my goal is to build capacity with my principals, and it's my hope that my principals then go and support and build capacity in their teachers and love them and support them. And then that trickles down to our kids. We do believe attitude reflects leadership, but it started with us and it ends with us. And if we weren't doing our part, then shame on everyone, because it's not fair to have teachers expect to do their part if we're not willing to do the same.
So as I said, I function well from graphics and looking at a tiered system of supports. So it was really important to highlight that we have a continuum of time, intensity, and data across all of the different tiers. And then when I talk about that integrated system of supports, we have our academic supports, but then we also have the social and emotional supports. Because again, which came first, the chicken or the egg? So you might have to do a lot of peeling back the layers of the onion to really be able to figure out what is effective and what students need. So this is how we aligned our system. And again, still learning and growing and tweaking, but it really helps us to provide like a quick perspective on what it is, what are we offering all kids, what are we offering some kids, and what are we offering a few kids, and how do we continue to tighten up those practices. And also realizing that it's core plus. So it's like everybody gets core plus that instruction and supplemental programming. And then for some kids, we had double dip. So it was core plus supplemental plus intensive instruction. So you're adding instructional minutes. You're not grouping them and just saying like, okay, you're getting tier 3. And so you're adding time to it. So they're getting all of those across the board.
The next couple slides are going to talk about how we navigated the complex change model, how we went through this to execute in a high manner. And what we want to tell people, we told our principals and our leadership staff and our Ange and everyone else, let's surrender the fact that this is complex. Let's surrender the fact it's going to be overwhelming, but it's not insurmountable. And we don't have to eat the elephant, you know, the old saying, we can only take a little piece, right? And let's take it one piece at a time and build on that. We didn't have to tackle everything at once. And we tried to put a plan in there that set us up for success, for execution. So the next couple slides, we'll go over in detail what we actually did to, to navigate this world. So the first thing we did was we looked at organizational, and there's a lot that can go in here, right? But organization, what do we need to do in order to be successful? So one, we needed a framework, right? A framework for leadership, a framework and a vision behind, you know, how we address teaching literacy to our students. But then we also need consistency in our schedules, right? You know, we have 6 buildings and 2 primary buildings where their schedules the same, and they weren't, right? Was it where kids get the same amount of literacy with being taught in the amount of time being afforded them, and they weren't, so we had to address that. Then we had to make sure we build in, you know, a period that personalizes for them what they need, right? So they can work on those instructional deficiencies and get them what they want so they can get caught up. We also then attacked it from a team approach, and we needed to make sure we have consistent data team meetings and infrastructure in place. So not only can we execute and instruct at high levels, but we understood and built systems in place to give teachers time to look at the data, understand the data, and then inform their instruction based upon that data. And also what we want to do is then look at instruction, right? Year 1, tier 1, and we're probably going to be year 2 on tier 1, and that's okay because there's beauty in the journey, and we got to keep moving the ship forward, and that's exactly what we're doing. And we want to intensify instruction, right, to meet the kids' needs. You know, we have high expectations for ourselves and others, and we push ourselves to meet that goal. And we also want to increase opportunities to respond to any questions, challenges that we may have, and to the needs of our students. But we wanted to focus on a systematic, direct instruction viewpoint, right? That's exactly what they need, is exactly what they're getting. And we built it upon a model that supported teachers with meaningful professional development that was aligned. I got to be honest with you, I would deny any professional development requests that weren't aligned to the vision of the district. And I got to be clear, we had a limited amount of money for training, for development, and we had to be systematic on what we approved and what we didn't. So it's towards our goal, right? And our goal was, hey, can we really have an intense laser-like focus on social emotional learning? And can we have an intense laser-like focus on the way we do literacy? And then we had to look at our system, K-12. We said our priority is going to be K-3. We want to build a solid foundation so we can then eventually get to better opportunities and better performance throughout the rest of the system. But our goal was to divide and conquer, focus on a strong K-3 model, and make sure that our teachers were supported and had professional development opportunities that were aligned with our vision.
And then we talked a little bit about the curricular changes that we made, that as evidenced based on the universal screening data, that the core program was ineffective as a standalone. So it had to be beefed up to make sure that it was encompassing all of those essential components of reading. And something that I wanted to emphasize is that programs don't teach, teachers do. And I think that that's something that, you know, Dr. Moats and Dr. Tolman always emphasize, that it really is the teachers that are the ones employing all of this work, and that was really important part of our message as well. So we lacked a systematic approach to literacy instruction, so that's where we added in Hegarty and foundations to address those components. And then we also had, and it's still a little bit difficult because we want all of those to come together, and we've also realized how important background knowledge is, and the knowledge gap. So if you've not read The Knowledge Gap by Natalie Wexler, that's something you should add to your reading list. But we really have to look at ways to make sure that if we are going to be equitable, we have to make sure we're also equipping our kids with equitable levels of knowledge so that we're progressing everyone and moving everyone forward. And then assessment. So as I mentioned, our universal screening, so for all kids, Dibbles Next K-3, as well as a spelling inventory. And then for students that fell within the at-risk range, we did deeper dives, which included a PASS, the Phonological Awareness Screening Test by Dr. David Kilpatrick, and the Core Phonics Survey. So that really allowed us to hone in on specific skills that students had to have targeted. And then from there, we were able to do the flexible groupings through win time so that there was movement. So once students mastered the skill, they were able to move to the next skill. And that was through the progress monitoring schedule that was put forth. So we were able to look at groups of kids and how well they were responding to interventions to make sure that their progress was aligning with the supports that were in place for them. And if it wasn't, what else did we have to consider? And that goes back to looking at all of the multifaceted parts of the system and the structure. So looking at things behaviorally, academically, and through the social emotional lens as well.
When we went through this part, though, at the end of the day, I think the most important part is We had to pick each other up. We had to encourage each other to get better through feedback, through conversations, through fierce conversations. The changes we did came hard and they came fast, right? But they weren't reckless. They were targeted, they were specific, and they are aligned to what the research and the data says. But we had to really address that and say to everyone, look, we're going to lead and we're going to stay the course. There's going to be times where it's tough, but we're going to pick ourselves back up and stay the course. Because again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but there are two things people hate: change and the way things are. We had to address those emotions. Teachers thought they were broke, and that's quite the opposite. They're amazing. What happened was our system was broke. For example, about a decade ago, Indiana area school district had less than 10% free and reduced lunch. You fast forward to the first year I came here, it's at 50%. And the system wasn't built to help those kids. And it was broken, and we needed to help all kids. If all means all, we had to really meet the moment, and that was our call to duty, to say, look, this is where we're at. It doesn't mean we're broken. It doesn't mean you're broken. It means we can get better, but we have to really address the problem, be honest with each other, and move forward. And I know, again, to be redundant, you can't build a better future by hoping for a better past, right? You can't change what we did before. We can't change or worry about how things have changed in our community or demographics. That's a blessing, not a curse. What we have to do, though, is understand where we're at, look at the data, and build a system that's equitable, that's fair, and that meets the needs of our students. And that's what we really want to do by supporting our staff every day. That's why we hired Ange. Before her, we had Ange and another young lady named Victoria, who were amazing. Now we have Shelly Wright and April Morelli coming into the district, who's going to do the same thing. You win with people. And if you're asking me what one of the most important things you could do as far as your journey, if you're going down this road, get the right people in the right spot. Get people who are caring, who are loving, but are firm in their beliefs and are going to run the play to make sure that we can get all kids reading, all kids performing, and all kids growing. And that was absolutely important to us. And we had to surrender, right? We had to surrender the fact that the changes were hard, that there was a lot out there, but you tell me when is a good time. Or you tell me, who are you okay leaving left behind, right? We weren't okay with any of that. And we had to go after it. We went through a lot, but we had to persevere. And we got through it. Love isn't just a feeling, it's a commitment. If we truly love kids, and all means all, that was what we pushed our staff to really stay the course, and it's working.
So moving the literacy initiative or any initiative forward, it's kind of, what I did is I took the problem solving model and I layered it over top of the system, because we have identified what it is we have to work through, but this is an ongoing, it's cyclical, so it continues to happen. So you always have to revisit the system. And it's also a shift away from student-centered problem solving. So, whenever I started practicing way back 15 years ago, it was considered child study. And so when you think about that phrase, child study, you're studying what potential problem exists within the child. And as this has evolved, it's not a problem that exists with a child, it's a problem that exists within a system. And then within that system, you have to figure out how to pull that up through the tiers to the tip of the triangle for some of those kids. So for your system, as it functions fluidly, those students will bubble to the top through your problem solving team meetings. And by that point, you can really, really hone in on what specific needs have to be addressed for those kids. And the other part too, as I reflect on what's best for kids, and I think this is sometimes difficult for teachers based on, having conversations with some of my letters facilitators, you get teachers that start to question, like, what have they done? Have I hurt kids? Has what I've been doing not been what's best? And I have felt that as a school psychologist, thinking, how many kids did I make eligible for special education, thinking that I was following best practices, that I was really looking at the data and doing what was in the best interest of the kids? Because in a lot of cases, how many of those were curriculum casualties? And it's been, again, very fascinating to see how some of these students have been real quick responders to the scientific instruction, and students with IEPs. And so I think that as school psychologists even, it makes you question, because we all want what's best for kids. So it's really important for us to look at the whole systemic approach, continue to problem solve and navigate the whole system, and revisit it, because again, it's not something you can just plop in and see how it goes. It's something that really has to be, it's like you plant the seed, but you have to make sure it gets water and sunshine and care so that it grows and is healthy. All right, so taking action for change. This is near the end of our presentation. And so, Mike and I were trying to figure out, how do you bring all of this back together, right? And so I tried to kind of brainstorm through all the different layers that we went through. And one part, you start having conversations, you establish a team, you get your needs assessment, so you figure out what is it that we really need to get better at. Then you have to create an action plan. And one of the best ways that I was able to help think about all of the steps that had to happen, first of all, I had to realize I didn't have to own it. Like, we're a team, and there's no one person is the connective tissue. We all are a part of this. So we had to create action items. And then from those action items, we had to designate task lists. So within, and I have Patton's plate there, within the leadership realm, okay, what has to happen under leadership? Okay, those are the action items. And then from those, what are the specific tasks we have to accomplish? Who's responsible for them? And when do we want them to be due? Because otherwise you can have a lot of conversations and there seems to be so much, but that really helped to eat the elephant one bite at a time and not the whole thing all at once. Lastly was engaging and evaluating. So engaging the process through fidelity checks and coaching. And then lastly, evaluating our student outcomes improving. And again, in all of those areas. So Patton has amazing resources for PA MTSS. So I encourage you to reach out to your TAC support at the IUs, as well as the Patton consultants as you move forward with MTSS implementation. And then Mike, you were going to highlight what's most important.
Yeah, you support the plan, right? When we did this, we identified, again, the standard is the standard. We're not going to apologize for that, but are we supporting our people? We're sending them into, per se, the war with the right necessary tools and not a butter knife. And that's absolutely crucial as you go through. So again, I think, big takeaway from you is you got to support your people. You got to love them up, and it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail. Like, for example, Dr. Pam Castor is probably one of the biggest influences in my life, where I met her a decade ago, and she helped me walk through and understand my ideas and my vision as a leader, and how I have to do more than just, create a schedule or create just good governance. I have to really love our people and build a plan and be courageous enough to take the first step, right? Because first step's the hardest, right? Whether it's weight loss, whether it's implementing a new literacy program, you got to be willing to take the first step and surrender the fact, again, and it's redundant, but there's two things people hate: change and the way things are. So you just do what's best for kids. And I know that sounds silly, but when you look at leadership, I think you can't separate heart from intelligence. You can't separate your moral conviction, your fiduciary responsibility to do what's best for your kids. And you can't be afraid to take a chance, right? We went slow to go fast, and we were fast in a lot of ways, but it wasn't reckless. And I think there's a difference between the two. For me, one thing we did to help with emotions, right? Because they came hard, they came fast, was how do we process this? How do we equip our team, our principals, to understand what happens in implementing complex change. And this chart's pretty simple. I don't need to go through it, but you can see what happens when certain things are planning, right? So in this case, vision, skills, incentives, resources. If the action plan is missing, you have false starts. You're working hard, but you don't know where you're going, right? And we don't know if it's measurable. So we put this in here as a little guide to understand that when you build your system, think through it in a way that you understand the change process and what that means. Because after all, you win with people. If you don't address these needs, you don't address these issues, you're not going to win. A program's not going to solve your issue. Good people are going to solve your issues. And the way you make them better is by equipping them and loving them up. And that's exactly what we tried to do as we went through our journey.
And from the coaching perspective, this tool was helpful for me because the emotions were strong. And, sometimes you would leave meetings feeling really beat up, and, you knew that you're still doing what's best for kids. You knew that you're still moving in the right direction, but that takes a toll on you when you're doing it at such a high frequency. So having something like this was helpful for me, just to be like, okay, so what am I missing? So what are these emotions telling me? So maybe this is the psychologist in me too, but what are these emotions telling me? And then how can I utilize that to help us grow? So this was a helpful tool for me, because I thought, wow, like this really kind of puts things together. So if there's frustration, what are the resources? Are people feeling like they need more coaching and support so that they can carry this through? Or if it's confusion, what is the vision? Where are we headed? What is our why? Why are we doing this? So this tool was just extremely helpful for me navigating the emotions of probably, 75 K3-ish teachers. And then we're adding to that as we go forward. And I've never met an educator that's not passionate about the work that they do. And so I can understand the passion and the drive behind their emotion. But it's definitely something, as you're implementing change, difficult to navigate. So this was a tool that was really helpful. So that's why I wanted to add it in there for anyone that's ready to tackle, or maybe you're in the midst of these changes as well. So lastly, just to kind of pull it all together, again, looking at it as what are the multi-tiered systems of supports that run through each of these strands. And there probably could be some other strands, but these are the ones that I felt were at the forefront of all of the changes that we have made, and also areas that we will continue to grow and develop every year going forward.
So again, to conclude everything, leadership matters. Most importantly, you matter. Our kids are worth this challenge. Our kids are worth this fight. Their future's worth it. You know, and if you say, well, that kind of sounds way too sentimental. No, it's just, I think that's the passion we have as educators, because their ability to learn depends on our ability to deliver, and we have to deliver. So we're challenging. Will you be the lone nut with the courage to start a movement? And if you need help, we're here. And more importantly, there's a lot we can learn from you. So this is not something where we're saying we're experts. We're just saying we took that change, we took that first step, and we're committed to our journey. So if you have any questions, you want to reach out to us, or if there is anything we can learn from you, please, we're willing to do that. We'd love and be honored to work with you and alongside you. And I wish you all the best in your own your movement.
Thank you very much. So I was taking questions out of the chat and adding them to a document. Several of the questions relate to whether or not you're willing to share the slides.
Yes.
Would you mind addressing, telling us that? So
Yes.
Yep. Yes, those will be placed in the Schoology.
Yeah. Can I email those to you?
Of course, yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you want me to give you more questions, or would you rather?
Yeah, I mean, we have, I think, eight
minutes.
Yeah. So
yeah.
We could take questions.
Yeah. Okay, so I have, can you state the training that you provided to the staff again?
Yes.
I think I was able to respond to that, but I want to make sure I got all of it.
Sure can. So we provided training to staff. We did letters module 1 with the plan to do further modules up through at least module 3. We also sent them to the Patent Foundations of Reading series that was offered. Not all, but we sent teams, because I think a lot of those were designed as TOTs, so people could come back and educate their district teams. We also did Haggerty phonological awareness training. We did training in, so we're going to follow along with Dibble's next to Acadians. So we also had them trained in that, but we also realized we had to train them a little bit more on assessment from that universal screening perspective and how to use that, the results of that tool.
From a leadership side, we had people go through a PIL course through Patan. On literacy, we're having them go through a data decision-making course offered through PIL, and then also through NISL, we're going to go through, we're going to try to go through a complex systems course that they can understand how the systems impact what we're trying to do. So that's what we did on the administrative side as well.
Great, thank you. And I had you had both stated that you were relatively new to the district. What was your journey in your prior districts that brought you to the recognition of the importance of the science of reading and the commitment to your new district?
Yeah, for me, it may sound a little emotional or whatnot, but it was Dr. Pam Kastner. So when I was at Johnstown, I knew her. She came in, she helped me grow, she helped us do a lot of different things. I got to Indiana and I brought my team and said, look, what's our philosophy of literacy? How do we teach reading? Do we have a literacy plan? What does it look like? What does great teaching look like to each and every one of you? And my principal struggled to explain. So I said, okay, rather than say, hey, push them to try to give an answer that would be wrong or inaccurate, what I did was I asked Pam to come in and do a needs assessment. She came in and said, look, here's what's going well. Here's what's, you can improve on. So what are you going to do to go fix it? So that's where my journey started, saying, look, once I knew there was a problem, I couldn't just ignore it anymore. I had to go through, I had to start fixing it, but I couldn't rush it and I couldn't do it by myself. So then I relied on other experts and I met great people along the way. And again, earlier in the presentation, I said you win with people. So the next step, once I found it was broken, let's go get good people who are willing to have the same values that Lisa and I have, who's willing to make that commitment. Because in absence of the program, you don't win without the people. So then I found Victoria Franco, I found Ange McMasters. Now I have Shelley Wright, and I have April Morelli, and I have a lot more people now building capacity because we couldn't do this alone. So step one was call on your friends, find out what's broken and what's working, get the needs assessment, then put people in place who can help you make things better. And that's exactly what I did.
Yeah.
For me, I felt like I was given a lot of different opportunities to grow my knowledge and my capacity as a school psychologist. And I felt like, I don't know if the best way to explain it is like, I felt like I'd outgrown my position, and I had a hard time deciding to leave that group to move forward. But I felt like I was at a place in my career that I've always known that I've wanted to have impact for kids. And I felt like I was only possibly impacting a small number of students that were coming across my desk for evaluations, but I wasn't really creating change for the masses. And I think that that was something that was really important. And it wasn't that we didn't have good leaders where I was at. It was just that it's such an undertaking. And when I say Mike's a visionary, I'm not kidding. Like, if it's almost like I've had to stop myself with ideas because he's like, yeah, let's do it. And I'm like, oh gosh, I'm going to end up with a task list a mile long. But for me, it was having the opportunity to take what I've learned and apply it with a team of people that isn't going to say, hey, that's a great idea. And everybody had so much on their plates that they weren't like, let's do this together. How can we thoughtfully put this together? So I think that that was really important, is finding your team.
Sorry, I had to mute. I had somebody
No,
walk
that's
right
okay.
through the room while I was. So one more question here about, or next question, that was, what social emotional curriculum programs have you found effective that kind of dovetail in with your literacy work for kinder first grade?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're actually using PATHS, which is Promoting Alternative Thinking Strategies. And that is implemented K-3. And last year was the first year of implementation in one building, and then it's folding out up through the 5th grade this coming year. But Mike and Justin Zahorchak really spearheaded those initiatives. So I'll let Mike jump in on that too.
Yeah, and look, our thought is this, is really simple. We're not going to get the academic gains we want until we start addressing their emotional needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I got here, we did a needs assessment there. That was null and void. It was absence. It was hope for the best. And please don't take that disparaging. Our teachers loved our kids, right? They really did, but we didn't have a system in place how we address those needs. So what we wanted to do was, we started with last year with social emotional needs. So we brought PATS in. Then we really took a hard look at the way we do school-wide positive behavior. Then we went and hired three school psychologists who also, it was weird. We were lucky. We found unicorns because they are also trained in the area of literacy too, right? So we locked down. As soon as I found 3 of them, we hired them, and we built some capacity in that way. But the social emotional learning piece is a huge part of what we're doing. And now we're trying to expand it even further to even include our staff, right, and their needs. Because you know what? Ask my wife. She'd probably say I'm emotionally immature at times, right? So how do we help people grow, and how do people understand this challenge? Because again, plans don't just solve everything. You need good people. And then as you go through this journey, we had a lot of barriers, and we had to stay the course and love people up. So PATHS was a big part of what we do. And I took my team out to Cleveland, Ohio, and I saw it implemented there. And I told them very clearly, if it can be implemented in Cleveland, it can be implemented in Indiana, right? And let's look at the importance of relationships, because people always talk about the need for relationships. And when you interview people, they tell you how much they love kids, but then 10 years from now, are they burned out? Are they tired? Do they still love those kids? And how do we help support our kids and them go through that? And I think our kids are going through a lot. Like on a personal note, now that this diatribe real quick, I absolutely despise social media, what it's done to kids, and some of the stressors they go through compared to what I did when I was a kid. I don't know how it's much difficult being a kid, right? It's much more difficult being a kid. So we had to love our kids, but then we also had to show them strategies how to overcome some of these issues, how to control their emotions. And I think what the beautiful thing we did that a lot of schools do is, for us, PATHS was that internal, right? How do I control my emotions, my thoughts, my feelings? And then externally, we rewarded and reminded those behaviors and expectations through school-wide. So we were able to work on those needs. And then what happened was, you had less classroom disruptions, you had less kids getting frustrated, and then teachers were more focused on saying, I love you, it's okay, you're not there yet, but we're going to get there, and we're not going to give up. So it's kind of a beautiful thing that we put together. And a lot of people are doing, please, it's not just us, but that's our magic,
Well, you have actually a lot more questions here, and I had been talking to Dr. McMasters about sending her these questions on a document, and then if you wanted to, write up or respond to some of
we're
them, we can post
absolutely,
that too.
yeah, we're happy to respond to questions and to share our PowerPoint. And if anyone, just sharing our journey, we're happy to do all of those things.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both very much for a wonderful session. I feel energized now.
Oh, thank you.
And I know that I've had a lot of comments in the comment box that people are like really good. So I want to thank everybody else too as well for attending the session. So the session has been recorded, and that recording will be uploaded to YouTube in the next coming days. We're also planning, the literacy team at Patton is also planning on creating supports that are aligned to the presentation from the symposium that will help maximize learning for families and for educators.